Hi, I'm Rachel and welcome back to Auxhart Gardening. In today's Harvest and Cook, I'm going to be showing you how to harvest basil and then make a basil pesto using a mortar and pestle. Try saying that 5 times fast. Alright, so since it is decided that it's going to rain all day today, we are on the porch with one of my basil plants. Now, basil is one of those plants that it's pretty easy to harvest, but if you're not sure how to do it, you can end up kind of stunting the growth of your plant instead of accelerating it. So we want to accelerate the growth of our basil because, of course, more basil is better, at least if you're me. And so the way I'm going to show you how to prune this basil and harvest it is going to allow the plant to basically double in size and split and bush out bigger and bigger every single time you harvest. Alright, so here is my basil plant. Now what you're going to want to look for is these little splits. I'll show you. So at the top of your plant you'll see a structure that looks like this. And if you look underneath, you see in the crooks right there, the new little leaves are starting to come out. So if you were to cut right above where the new little leaves are coming out, you would get something that looks a bit like this. So you can see it was cut here and split here. And again, it was cut here, and then you can see the new little leaves coming up on the sides of both of these stems. So where this was one stem is now going to be 4 stems as the plant continues to bush out. We can look again here. Here's the cut, and you can see it has now branched into 2 because of the little leaves that came right out of the crooks of that stem. So when you're harvesting basil, you just want to make sure that you're looking for cutting directly above where you see a good strong split already starting to happen. Also, for those of you who follow me a little bit more closely, I wanted to take this chance while we're inside to introduce Kata. She is the newest resident in my house, newest member of the family, and soon to be the newest garden cat once she's big enough. She'll probably end up making a lot of noise because she's so rambunctious. So I apologize for that if you happen to hear her in the background. This is what I'm talking about when I say she's probably going to be making noise in the background. She just can't help herself. She's got so much energy. Alright, so here is the mortar and pestle that I'm working with. I, at this point, can't recommend a specific type of mortar and pestle over another because this is all I've ever had, but I do like it. It's made of granite, and I think the brand was Gorilla or something like that. It was a gift. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start with the garlic. Now I'm taking just 1 clove of garlic, but this is totally up to you, however garlicky you like it. For reference, this is the volume of basil that we're using with that 1 clove of garlic. So first thing you want to do is you're going to mash down pretty hard to break up the clove and then stir around while you're kind of mashing it into the sides. Mortar and pestle is less of a pushing motion and more of a circling motion once you've kind of gotten broken up. And I'm going to take you over here for a close-up while I do that. Alright, so a lot of recipes online will vary when it comes to this step. Most of them agree that you should do the garlic first. A lot of them say that you should do the walnuts or pine nuts next. However, I'm going to do the basil leaves next because I find if you do the nuts next, they end up getting mashed up a little too much. I like for there to be a little bit of chunky nuts in mine, but if you don't want the chunky nuts at all, go ahead and do nuts first and then leaves. But I'm going to do leaves and then nuts. Another thing to note is that I am going to chop this before I put it in. I've tried not chopping it and you can break down the leaves, but it's a whole lot harder. So I'm just going to give this a quick rough chop before I put it in my mortar. Oh, and one more thing before I start chopping. You can choose to de-stem your basil if you like, especially if you have a lot of longer stems. However, you don't have to. The flavor isn't really affected by a little bit of stem, and so with something like this, I'm not really going to worry about it. Alright, so this is what I'm looking at here with my basil, and we're just going to take it and put it all right in. Okay, so I just worked on that for about another minute or two, not that long, and you can see that it's a lot darker green now and kind of looking like a mush. You may even notice that there's some juice at the bottom coming out of the leaves. So the next step is going to be to add our nuts. So I like to use walnuts for this, mostly because I always have them in my house, and also they're so much cheaper than pine nuts, and I think they give you just as good of a pesto. Alright, so I am eyeballing this, I guess, but I'm taking about this much walnuts into here. Again, add more or less depending on your preferences. If you want it crunchier, go ahead and add more. The flavor of the nuts is not so much of a problem as the texture, in my opinion. So if you want it crunchier, add more nuts. If you want it a little less crunchy, add less nuts. So again, the idea is going to be to mash it down first and then go in with our round. Alrighty, and I'm going to stop with the nuts at about this consistency, just because that's a little bigger than I want them in the final product, and we still have to put in the cheese and spices. Alright, so for cheese, I'm using a block of Parmesan. It's aged 10 months. If you can afford something that's aged longer, I highly recommend it. The difference in the taste, if you've never tried it, is huge. But, seeing as this is what I can afford, this is what I'm using. So I'm just going to take this out and set it off to the side. And I'm going to take my grater and put it right over the bowl. And I'm going to use the smaller side of the grater and just grate like a little bit less cheese than I added nuts into the bowl. Again, how much cheese you add is totally personal preference. This is about how much I have put in. Alrighty, so it doesn't take long to get that cheese mixed in. And so the last three things we need to add are our salt, pepper, and oil. So for salt, again, I'm eyeballing it a little bit, but I'm gonna go with what I would estimate to be about a teaspoon of salt. You can always add more, you can choose to add none. It's totally up to you and your preferences. I'm also going to add in some fresh ground black pepper. I'm going to go with about half as much pepper as I put in salt. Right, and then the last step is to add your olive oil. Now this, again, it's really up to you and how thick or fluid you want your sauce. So if you want something thick, maybe to lay on top of a chicken, you'll want to add less oil. But if you're trying to get this to spread out over pasta, maybe you're going to want to add some more oil so that it can spread itself a little thinner. Alrighty, so here is what my finished pesto looks like. You can see it's still got very distinct chunks of things, and that's the biggest reason that people do this with a mortar and pestle instead of in a blender traditionally, because it really keeps the flavors as more of separate pieces that are coming together for a flavor rather than a homogeneous flavored solution, you know? Alrighty, so this is the texture that I was going for. It's a little darker because of that purple basil that I put in. But basically you can just add this directly to whatever it is you're cooking, or you can put it in an ice cube tray and freeze it. This is actually one of my favorite things to do because I want pesto more than just in the summer. So if I make a bunch and freeze it into little like single serving cubes, I can just make some pasta, melt some pesto over it. Usually I add in a little bit extra oil as I'm rewarming the pesto from frozen, so that it just gets that nice texture. But other than that, that's literally all there is to it. Alrighty, and that is our harvest and cook for the day. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Happy gardening!